Alright guys, hello and welcome to another video. Today is another kind of impromptu video where I will be setting up a very simple, well maybe not very simple, but I'm going to attempt to set up a late 90s sort of vintage surround sound system. Well, minus the subwoofer because I do not have a subwoofer yet, but I'm using equipment mostly from around the late 90s. And the star of this whole setup is going to be for Laserdiscs and playing Laserdisc movies. So I'm just going to show you how I am going to set up my system. Of course, it can vary, and I'll point out little things that maybe you can do differently. So just to start out, my system is very simple. I don't really have a lot of experience with surround sound, so I'll just show you some of the equipment really quick. There's the two speakers on top of my TV there, the KV FE 36310 or 36 KV 3 something, whatever. Anyways, I just grabbed whatever I could find at the thrift store. I paid like $5 for these, right, left, and center. And then I have speaker wire, some of it's down there. And then over there, and more really cheap speakers stuck to the wall for the surround sound, the right and left. I do not have a subwoofer, but I can add one easily. Really quick, here's the receiver I'm using. I'll tell you why I picked this receiver, other than the fact I found it really cheap. It's a Denon AVR, I believe 3600. Alright, so I'm not going to go too into depth on this stuff, so, but I think since we go into this, since I was talking about how Laserdisc is kind of the point of this setup, I'm going to have to give you a basic understanding about surround sound on Laserdisc. So first I'm going to introduce the main player I'm going to be using. Now this is the DVL 909. This is a combo player, so this is a Laserdisc and DVD player, but again, I found this really cheap at Goodwill. It works 100% and it has all the connections in the back that we need for surround sound with Laserdisc. So I'm going to turn this guy around and give you a real quick talk about surround sound with Laserdisc, because it is a little less plug and play than say DVD is. So let me just zoom in on the connections we need to talk about. Sorry, the lighting is terrible. Alright, so there's the back of this unit. Alright, so first off, for Laserdisc, we have our really old ones that just kind of use analog, and we all know analog is these little red and white left and right stereo. And so you really want, especially for older Laserdiscs that just have analog output, you're still going to need that. So, and we have them right here, the right and left are analog. Alright. Now, I am not an expert. I am still learning about surround sound, so I think you can still get, because I've had Laserdisc hooked up with just analog, and I've had what seemed like surround sound, so I think there's some like Dolby surround sound that use some kind of algorithm, and it can output the other channels through these, and then it separates them if your receiver can decode Dolby surround sound. I'm not sure how it works. There's so many weird Dolby, like there's Dolby Pro Logic, Dolby Pro Logic 2, Dolby Digital. I haven't really grasped all that yet. So if someone would like to enlighten me in the comments, please do, because I am still trying to figure that out. So the next thing we're going to talk about is digital. Now, eventually, Laserdiscs, and a lot of them support this. I'll give you an example here. You can see it on the back. It will say digital sound stereo, Dolby Digital surround sound. So that's pretty much CD quality, digital sound. And you're either going to need a digital coaxial, or you're going to need an optical out, digital optical out, or TOS link they call these, to get your like stereo or your digital signal. Again, I believe the Dolby does that too. It goes like Dolby Digital Surround works through that. Now there's another standard called DTS. Now pretty much DVDs all can do this. I don't know if every DVD has a DTS soundtrack, but I know DVD players, it's really plug and play. it's a little bit different for Laserdisc. Well, yeah, it's different for Laserdisc. As you must have some kind of digital out, first of all, or you just can't get a DTS surround sound. Now, supposedly DTS is the best you can get surround sound wise for Laserdiscs. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of them, maybe 100 titles, give or take, that are DTS, and you will know because they'll say, they're really proud about it. It will say DTS surround sound usually at the top, really big. I don't have any DTS Laserdiscs. They're a little bit hard to find and they're a little bit pricey, but supposedly they give the best surround sound. Now, my receiver over there does not decode DTS, but I'm going to talk about how I'm getting around that in a second here. So basically, if you want a DTS from a Laserdisc, you're going to need a Laserdisc player with some sort of digital out, and then you're going to need some kind of decoder or receiver that can decode the DTS. Now lastly, what we're going to talk about is AC3. Now this is probably the most prevalent form of surround sound on a Laserdisc, and it sounds really good. DTS is supposed to sound a little bit better with a little bit better separation, but AC3 surround sound from a Laserdisc is it's great. I love it. In my opinion, it sounds a little better than like DVDs. I believe the audio on DVDs is all compressed, where on Laserdisc it's not, but it just sounds a little bit better. And this is really the most common form of sort of like true surround sound. And usually, sorry, it's so zoomed in, but you'll see it like under it on the back if you look. I don't know if it's so blurry. I'm sorry, this thing won't focus. But it will say, like here it says Dolby Digital, and under it it will say AC3 Digital. So you want to look for that say AC3 Digital. And basically what they had to do is they had to encode it on a Laserdisc in RF, so radio frequency. So if you want to play Laserdiscs that have AC3 Digital surround sound, you're going to need players with specific outputs. Now mine is right here, and it will be labeled. It says AC3 and then in parentheses LD, since this is a combo player. And Laserdisc, as far as I know, is the only media source that uses this sort of AC3 RF. Now it's very important. There is, I think, just general digital surround sound AC3, but Laserdiscs use AC3 RF, so you got to really look for that. So yeah, mine has the output right here, and what you need is a receiver that also has an AC3 RF input and a demodulator. Now, that is part of the reason I picked the Denon over there that I showed you earlier. It has a built-in AC3 RF connector on it. So basically, all I have to do is use I think you can use any RCA cable, but I would prefer using something a little bit better quality, a little bit like heavy shielding, like this guy, if I can get it in the picture, something like this. And you just plug it in here, and then you plug it into your receiver that has the connection that will say AC3 RF, and that's basically it. Now there's a little button on my receiver that says RF, and when I have a Laserdisc in there that is, using AC3 RF, or it has that ability on it, I just click that button, a couple lights come on, and I get really awesome Laserdisc surround sound. So that's the thing. Now, I went a little backwards with my setup, because I found a receiver that has AC3 RF demodulator built in, and I got it for really cheap. I don't think that's the best way to do it. If I was going to suggest how to do it, I'm also going for like an aesthetic, and that Denon over there, I believe that's from 97 or 98, so it kind of matched my time frame. But I think the way I would suggest doing it is getting a newer AV receiver, something that supports stuff like DTS, things like that, and then you can get a little separate AC3 RF demodulator, and that way you can use a more modern receiver that's better with modern standards, and it has it supports DTS and all that stuff, and then you could just get your AC3 RF demodulator. A lot of companies like Yamaha, I believe, made them. A little hard to find now, a little pricey, $60 to $100. Sometimes you can get them cheaper, but I think that's the way to go rather than the way that I went with an older receiver that had the demodulator built in. And, well, I'll show you what I have in a minute. Now, this thing I found maybe 2 weeks ago for $20, and this is a separate sound processor. Let me see if I can... Now, this is a Technics unit, but you can't tell because the little badge is broke off. I can see in the lens there's like lighting here. I'm sorry about the weird lighting issue. But anyways, this is a digital surround processor, an SHAC500D. And now what this does is this, I can actually use this to to process like Dolby Digital, and more importantly for me, DTS, because my receiver does not support DTS surround sound. So basically what the plan is, I use the digital outputs on my media devices. I feed them into here. Here's 3 button digital 1, 2, and 3. It processes those signals, and then via these it'll feed them to my receiver, and then my receiver will send them to the speakers. So with this little device, theoretically I can get DTS if I get like DTS Laserdiscs and whatnot. You do need a player or a receiver that has these. There's like one for right, left, center, subwoofer, and then the right and left surround sound speakers, and my receiver does have them. So basically it would be like this. Laserdisc comes into one of these digitals, either the coaxial or the optical. DVD player comes into one of them. I have an older Blu-ray player, goes into 3, say, and then these come, well, here's the line out. Then these go into my AV receiver, and then theoretically when I play a movie, I just select, there's buttons on the front. This one is an automatic DTS Dolby surround sound. I pick which one the player's outputting, and then I hit 6-channel button on the receiver, and then theoretically I'll get my surround sound. So yeah, a little bit backwards. Like I said, I would really suggest you get a receiver that has DTS built into it, and then just find an AC3RF demodulator. But you're going to be using, for Laserdisc, you're going to be encountering AC3RF a lot more than DTS. So there's that. But this was kind of neat. Like I said, I found this for $20. So haven't tested. I powered it on, but I haven't tested it yet. So I really hope it works. So I will have a couple other components in this setup. This is just one of those Pelican AV switchers, and this doesn't really have to do with the hi-fi system. This is more for switching video games and stuff. But 2 more things. I'm going to possibly have the tape deck hooked up to it, but we've seen a video on that already. Now the other thing I'm going to have hooked up, although that Laserdisc player is a combo player, I don't want to wear out the laser on it or the motor mechanisms, so I'm not going to play DVDs on that, but I will play DVDs on this. And this is another vintage kind of era DVD player. This is a Sony DVP S53OD. I don't know, DVD players are a little bit different than Laserdisc players, as in Laserdisc players, you'll get a better image and you'll get a lot better quality with the more expensive players, whereas DVD really being digital, the picture seems pretty much the same from like a lousy cheap player to an expensive player. But this one seemed like a pretty decent player. DTS decoding, it does that all. I like how it has a little jog wheel. So this is a pretty cool player. I picked this up for $10 at Goodwill. Has played DVDs perfectly, and it has component on the back. It has your digital out and whatnot. So if anyone has a suggestion for a really nice, over-engineered, overbuilt DVD player from like 1998, 1999, 2000, let me know, because I'd be curious to add that to the setup. And that's really about it for playing media. I'm probably going to have the old tape deck hooked up to it, and then probably can't see it, but over there, tucked into there, I do have an older Blu-ray player, and I have the cable snaked around, and it's going to be connected to the surround sound as well. And that's just because sometimes, especially for older movies, I kind of like watching them on the SD set. And sometimes I only have them on Blu-ray, or I want to see a special feature on the Blu-ray or something like that. So I don't mind watching Blu-ray movies, especially older 80s movies on an SD set. It's a good compromise. It's a really good picture, but you know, sometimes I kind of feel like Blu-rays of older movies on an HD TV, it just pops a little bit too much. Like, you know, color-wise, just doesn't look right to me. It doesn't have that nostalgic value. So sometimes I just prefer laying down and watching a Blu-ray on an SD set. So what I'm going to do now is hook all this up and cross my fingers and pray that it works. Alright, so I have a very basic, basic setup. I just kind of have the LD player, and I've got the sound processor and the AV receiver all hooked up. Nothing else yet. So my first test, I just wanted to test AC3RF out, since it's not using this at all. It's going straight from the Laserdisc player into the demodulator that's built into this receiver. Okay, so I was wrong about this. This is an AVR 3200, by the way, and I believe there is an AVR 3200 that has DTS decoding built in. Mine doesn't. Mine's the older one. So anyways, as you can see, it says AC3RF. There's a button right here for auto or manual to enable it, and as you can see on the Laserdisc player, it says Dolby Digital right there. So the AC3RF is working, and I have True Lies in there, and I will hit play real quick. And you probably can't hear it, but yeah, it definitely is really good sort of sound separation coming out there. So, okay, so there's my AC3RF. That's working. I didn't think that would be a problem. So now to see if just like the Dolby Digital is working. Now I don't have any DTS stuff, at least on Laserdisc. I might have a DVD or something that does that, but I'm going to test out just regular, both an analog and I'll try something through the digital. Alright, so now I'm testing Laserdisc. I'm testing red heat, and I'm doing this through the analog. So this is just the red and white, and those are going straight into the receiver. Now when I start the Laserdisc, it automatically selects this Pro Logic light comes up, but I usually find I have better, the sound is a little bit better. There's this matrix button down here, and it usually sounds better with the matrix enabled. I believe that uses some kind of trickery to maybe fake surround sound or something. I am not sure. If someone could explain that to me, what the difference between having the Pro Logic working with the surround sound and the matrix, let me know, but I prefer how the matrix sounds, and I just have it selected because I have the analog inputting on the DVD slash VDP input on the back through analog. Now VDP, if you're wondering, I believe that stands for video disc player, so that's just kind of like another way, they said that, you know, another kind of word for a Laserdisc player of something like that. Alright, so yeah, this sounds fine. And you can hear it on this speaker too. Not nearly as good as that AC3RF, but it's working. So now it's just testing the digital out, which I've always had problems with this. So we'll see what happens now with that, with this sound processor hooked up. Alright, so for the digital, actually it's working now. Without the processor, I used to get this light would come on and it's error overload, and I couldn't get the digital out for whatever reason on even just regular digital surround sound Laserdisc. But now, I don't know what it was. Maybe something wasn't set up, because I know this thing can decode the Dolby, but Dolby Digital, but whatever. Now it seems to be working with the sound processor. So I set this to surround, which would be the Dolby, I believe. It's on the digital one, and then it's going out into the receiver, and then I set it to digital. So there's a light for analog and digital. I have it set to digital, and then there's a button here that says 6 channel, and that is those 6 cables coming from the sound processor unit to the receiver. And I'll hit play, and it's working. So now it's digital. Although you can hear it coming out over here on this speaker. So, sorry for jumping around like that so much. So yeah, I'm happy that I have this thing working now without that weird overload error. So that's cool. So now I just need to set up the DVD player and find a subwoofer. And the reason I'm having trouble with a subwoofer is because this receiver, it doesn't have like 2 stereo wires. It needs like a powered subwoofer, and I believe it just uses like a cable like this. And I can't, you know, at the thrifts I just haven't found a subwoofer. The subwoofers I'm finding are all either they use speaker wire to hook up, or they use some kind of proprietary connector. So I'm just waiting to find a decent, really cheap subwoofer at like Goodwill or a thrift. So yeah, that's cool. So this thing is working now. So I just got to find some DTS Laserdisc now, since this guy here can decode DTS. So that should be pretty cool. So I guess I'll get back to you once I have everything hooked up. I also know this isn't like an optimal situation because of heat and weight, but I have nowhere else to stack these things. So, you know, all in all, I don't have a lot of money into this. These are all like pretty vintage, you know, mechanisms or electronics here. So if something dies, I mean, this is a really nice Laserdisc player, and I'll be really sad, but I just have nowhere else to put them. It's either stack them here or just not have anything at all. So I'll get back to you once this thing is completely set up. Alright, so this is a couple days later from the stuff I shot with the Laserdisc player, and my setup's pretty much set up. The cassette disc, or the cassette deck, it just made the setup a little too high, so I've omitted it for now. You may be wondering, why do I have a monitor up there? Space concerns. My computer down there actually is the one I use for capturing footage from all these other DOS machines and consoles and stuff, so I need a way to view what's going on that, obviously. So I just have my monitor. It's pretty light. I wouldn't mind even using a smaller, lighter one, but all these things on top of the LD player combined are all very light, so I'm not really too concerned about that. But anyways, yeah, this is pretty much how I have it set up. I'd love to add a VCR to this setup. I'd love to add my beta player to this setup too, but it's just too damn heavy. And I'm not sure. I might just keep it with this because that's a pretty healthy stack of things there. All right, so we went through and we saw the LD player, did AC3 RF and analog and then digital Dolby surround sound. Another two things in the day since I shot the last part. One is, if you can see down there, I added a subwoofer to the setup. It's a powered subwoofer. I think they call them a super woofer. Yeah, it's an RCA, complete mismatch with everything else, but it was cheap and it was at a thrift store. So other than that, I got a little badge for my Technics, the audio processor. That kind of stuff just drives me nuts. And at the thrift store, I actually came across another one of these units, and it was on sale for $7, and it had the little badge. So yeah, I picked it up. I know you already got one, you know, what's just a badge, but like I said, that stuff drives me crazy sometimes. So I really just wanted the little badge. So anyways, it's all pretty much working now. We saw the Laserdisc side of it, which is really you know, the main piece of this late 90s, early 2000s surround sound setup I have going here. But I did want to talk about the DVD player a little bit, take a little bit closer look at this DVD player, because I really like this player. Again, so you might be saying, wow, it's really redundant. This plays DVDs too, but like I said, these aren't too common, and they're getting pricier, and I don't want to wear out the motor mechanism in it. I believe it uses 2 separate lasers for laser discs and DVDs, but I just want to use this solely for laser discs. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I do have a little Blu-ray player over there hidden away, but I don't know if I'm always going to have that hooked up to this TV. And I mean, I could use that for DVDs, but you know, where's the fun in that? I would rather go a little authentic here, and I just like this player. I like how it looks. There's a little phono jack for headphones or whatnot. with a level. Now there's a little VES button, virtual something sound. I forget what that sound, virtual entertainment sound, something like that. But I think what that does is if you don't have surround sound, you just have 2 stereo speakers. I think it kind of like emulates surround sound somehow. I'm not really sure about that, but you know, just your normal stuff. There's a little light here when Dolby Digital is active, it lights up. Shuffle button, program button, open, close, repeat, clear, play, pause, stop, previous scene and next scene. Title takes you to the title. No, well, there's DVD menu. That takes you to the DVD menu. Title, not quite sure what the difference is. Return, and then there's this jog button, which is also light when you have to hit to make the little jog wheel become active, which you can kind of go through scenes. And if you don't have a remote, this is really handy too, this little up down for like navigating navigating the DVD screens, like title screen stuff, because I've had players without that, and if you don't have the remote, it's like really hard or impossible to navigate. So I guess real quick, we'll just see the DVD side of this. Now earlier I said about I wasn't sure about DTS. No, not all DVDs have DTS soundtracks, only some do. They don't all have Dolby Digital Surround either, 5.1, but vast majority of them I believe do, but DVDs can support either of those standards. So let's just check out the DVD side of this setup. And remember, like I said, if any of you have like suggestions for a better DVD player from that time period, we're looking at you know, like 98, if they were even around. I'm sure that they were around in 98, but like 98 to maybe like 2000, 2001. But I don't know, I'm pretty satisfied with this. And yes, I do know about Nuon players, but I already have one of those. I'm waiting to get some software for that to do a video on it. So I'll show you this thing working now. And also, I'm sure some of you surround sound aficionados and whatnot are thinking that's really not the best place to have your subwoofer. I researched all that. I know about doing the subwoofer crawl and all that crap. If you can't see, I have a space issue, and that's really the only spot that I could put it realistically. I had a PC there. I actually had to move and take out of my setup because there was nowhere else to place that thing. So it's good enough for this setup. But yeah, okay, so this is Dolby 5.1, and you'll see, I like how it will say, you know, you can pick, but you do have to manually pick, like I said before. But it will show all your little speakers, and it will, when I hit play here, it will say digital, right? There, so it is doing the digital surround sound. And, you know, you probably can't really hear it. Well, you can hear it, but you can't get the surround sound thing, but it is working. And here's that cool jog wheel. You hit that button, and you can sort of go through the scenes, you know, kind of like a frame at a time, which is pretty cool. I don't see that on like all DVD players, especially DVD players these days. They seem to just be like really cheap $20 players with like minimal things on them. They just, you know, throw out for mass production. DVD players just don't seem to have all the fancy little features anymore. But then again, people don't really give a crap for the most part about physical media, so I guess that makes sense. So now we'll put on a DTS just to show you that is working and how that works. So Jason X is the movie we'll be testing DTS with, and yeah, I know, but it's the only movie I have that has DTS. It has Dolby Digital 5.1 and DTS surround sound, so I really don't think I have any other options. Okay, so when this movie first comes on, it defaults to you know, Dolby 5.1 surround sound, but you can, this is pretty all self-explanatory stuff, but you can go into screen and sound options and then pick DTS if that's what you want to do, and you select it and subtitles off and then resume film, although I didn't even start the film. But if you have this, some sound processors, like I said, they do it automatically. This one doesn't, so it's still set to the Dolby 5.1. but I believe this intro is still in Dolby 5.1, but I believe when the movie starts, there'll be no sound because I told it to use the DTS soundtrack. So let me just see if that is correct. And yeah, see how it went off when the movie started. So, Alright, so there's the movie going, and there's no sound because this is still set to Dolby Surround. So let's just hit the DTS button and let's see if it works. Yep, see the little DTS light came on to confirm, and there we go, running in DTS. Now, let me just pause this. Okay, now I don't have any DTS Laserdisc to test, but I assume it would work just fine, so. Alright, so that's a basic overview of my sort of vintage surround sound setup. Vintage not in the sense of 70s sort of vintage, late 90s, sort of early 2000s maybe surround sound setup for stuff like standard definition stuff, obviously like DVDs and specifically Laserdiscs. So there was a lot of confusion with me, and there still kind of is, about Laserdiscs and how all the different ways it can output sound and surround sounds in different standards. So that's been a learning process for me, but I hope maybe this video helped a little bit. Maybe I know it wasn't real professionally done and super concise and whatnot, but I hope it helped in some way. Another thing I want to add is it kind of tripped me up for a little bit, but remember with the DVD players and even Laserdisc players sometimes certain things aren't on by default when you get them, or maybe if you're buying them used like me, the previous owner turned them off for some reason. But remember to try to go into the menus. I had to do that with this DVD player and actually enable things like DTS, like support for DTS and Dolby Digital, because at first everything was set up and it wasn't outputting DTS no matter what I did, and I had to go into the menu on this DVD player and enable it. And same with Dolby Digital, it was outputting, everything was just defaulting to Dolby Pro Logic, and I had to enable Dolby Digital on this player. It was disabled for whatever reason. So if you're having issues, just remember to check that. Another thing, like I said earlier in the video, the easier way to do this would just to get a newer receiver that supports DTS, and then if you're doing this for a Laserdisc player, then I definitely would recommend getting like a separate module that can demodulate AC3 RF, and just pairing that with a newer receiver. I kind of did it the backwards way, where I had an older receiver that had the AC3 RF demodulator built in, and then I picked up the Technics demodulator for DTS. I mean, both ways work just fine, but it seems like the other way's a little bit better, since you're going to be getting a newer, probably more reliable receiver that has, supports newer standards if you want to use it for other things like Blu-rays. Now, like I said, I have my older Blu-ray player hooked up to it, and it mostly works just fine. But I noticed for certain movies that have it's called HD DTS. I guess it's a little bit different standard, and it works for the most part, but there's some distortion on some of the voices, and I'm guessing, I'm chalking that up to something in this older setup just can't fully support that newer standard. Although like I said, I'm still learning. I'm not really a super expert on this, so I'm not sure if that's the issue. But with the DVDs and the Laserdiscs and stuff, everything's been working just fine. But just something to keep in mind. It's a lot easier to find a newer receiver too. The older receivers that actually have the built-in AC3 demodulators, they weren't even that common back in the late 90s, I don't think. So it's just easier to go the other way, get a newer receiver, and then get the AC3 RF demodulator. And if you do get a newer receiver, they're all pretty much going to support DTS. So that's about it. Any comments or questions, please feel free in the comments. I hope this helped some people out in some way, or at least it was entertaining. And I'll see you again in the next video, and thanks for watching.